Water Guardian? Kevin uttered as he frowned slightly. This was the first time he had heard of the Water Guardian. If there really was such a legendary figure, why didn't he come across any relevant records about him in the past? Where did you get this information from, exactly? Kevin immediately asked. The great powers were actually informed about the Water Guardian by the government officials in charge of sealing off the lake. As for whether the legend is true or false, there is no way to verify it now. Even if there really is such a figure, any records must have long been washed away by the tide of history, Alfred related. All right, bring a few people over to Chicago tomorrow. You will come with me to Lake Erie to see whether this so-called Water Guardian is real or not. After saying this, Kevin hung up the phone. Kevin had a bad feeling in his heart. The great powers who had heard about the ancient ruins and swiftly took action, the sudden threat of the Water Guardian, as well as the government officials who had taken the initiative to warn them about the presence of this elusive figure, all made him uneasy. Given the timing of it all, Kevin kept feeling that these were all strangely connected, but at the moment, he was unable to think clearly enough to figure things out. The night passed quickly. At 6 o'clock in the morning, Ethan Williams slowly opened his eyes. The first thing that he saw was Thomas Williams's grim face staring back at him. Thomas had been in the hospital room with his son since yesterday. As he sat by Ethan's bedside and waited for him to wake up, he had not slept. Ethan's nose suddenly twitched as he pleaded with a sobbing tone. Dad, you must avenge me. That piece of trash, Kevin, he... Ethan's words were filled with despair. Back in New York City, he had always been the one to bully others. Now that the tables had turned on him in Chicago, how could he accept it? Shut up, you ignorant fool! Thomas roared as his originally expressionless face suddenly turned ferocious. Stunned by his father's scolding, Ethan called out in disbelief. Dad! Although things between them had been especially tense of late, Ethan was still Thomas Williams' son. Given this, after finding out that Ethan had suffered such a serious injury, he shouldn't have started cursing the moment his son woke up, right? Do you know what you have done? Your actions have undoubtedly pushed the Williams family over the edge of a cliff and into the abyss. Thomas reprimanded him harshly and then added, You know, it wouldn't be such a loss to our family if you had just died. So you should be grateful that you're still alive. Dad, what are you talking about? Since I'm your son, shouldn't you be on my side no matter what? Besides, this was all Kevin's fault, so that piece of trash must die. Ethan argued. You still have the nerve to call others trash. Why don't you take a good look at yourself? Anyway, the only reason why I stayed here until you woke up was to tell you that this matter ends here. I've already arranged for someone to bring you back to New York City immediately. I will deal with you then. After saying these words, Thomas turned around and sped out of the hospital room. When Kevin received the news that they had left Chicago, he just shook his head and turned a blind eye. As the saying goes, blood is thicker than water. Although he had been expelled from his family, at the end of the day, he wouldn't do anything to destroy them. This was also the main reason why he ultimately decided to spare Ethan's life. But even Kevin wondered if that was a decision that might prove fatal in the future. After calling Alfred Dixon to ask about the ancient ruins in Lake Erie, Kevin learned that not only did he have to compete against several schools from the great powers, but the government had also issued a warning about the Water Guardian, a so-called legendary figure who protected its waters. When Ethan Williams finally woke up the next morning and saw Thomas by his bedside, Thomas scolded him for putting the Williams family at risk with his actions. He then arranged for Ethan's immediate return to New York City, unaware that Kevin had already decided against destroying his own family. Back at the Salix Leaf Complex, Lily slowly walked downstairs to the kitchen. When Kevin saw her, he put away his phone and eagerly went up to ask with concern, "Good morning." Are you still feeling dizzy from last night?" As Lily looked at the flattering smile on Kevin's face, it was as if she had returned to a year ago, when Kevin was still just an ordinary person and did not have any ambitions or responsibilities outside of being her husband. Although he did not have any special abilities, he could always stay by her side and take care of her. However, this illusion only appeared for a moment before Lily regained her senses and drifted back to reality. "I still feel a little hungover. What are we eating this morning?" Lily yawned and went to sit at the dining table. "I made us some oatmeal as well as bacon, eggs, and toast," Kevin exclaimed as he proudly showed off his dishes as if he were the head chef of a 3-star restaurant. Although there was nothing special about any of these dishes, they were all personally cooked by him. Because of this, Lily nodded her head excitedly and immediately drank some of the coffee that Kevin handed over to her. Lily was the first to break the silence and asked with some hesitation, "When are you going to leave again?" Given Kevin's current ambitions, it was almost impossible to keep him at home for long. Moreover, even if he wanted to stay, one of his enemies would surely draw him out. "In a few days," Kevin replied as he finished his eggs, then added, "But before that, I have to go to the Williams Company and make sure that you'll have the means to fight Dalton in the future." "What exactly is going on between you and Dalton anyway? Weren't the two of you extremely close?" Lily could not help but ask. Hearing this, Kevin, who was about to get up and pick up their plates and bowls, suddenly froze. "Dalton and I had some sort of misunderstanding that can't really be explained in just a few words." Kevin then looked at Lily seriously and continued, "Just promise me one thing. Once the Williams Company secures the upper hand over the Steel Group, don't forget to show mercy." While Lily did not understand Kevin's reasons for saying this, she still nodded in agreement. After he washed the dishes, the two of them got ready and drove to the Williams Company. As soon as they parked and got out of the car, Kevin heard a voice calling Lily from nearby. When he turned around, he saw a man in a gray suit quickly walking toward Lily with a face full of joy. He then took out a light blue gift box and beamed. "Lily, I bought this gift for you yesterday. I hope you like it." As he observed this person, Kevin's eyes narrowed at how he was being unusually attentive to Lily. Lily hesitantly looked at Kevin and asked, "Do you think I should accept it or not?" Hearing this, the man's expression changed slightly. He then shifted his gaze toward Kevin, who he had already noticed earlier, but did not think much of until now. "Lily, is this?" the man asked with a fake smile. "I'm her husband. Who are you?" Kevin immediately took over the conversation and asked back. However, the man simply raised his eyebrows at Kevin and snorted, "Oh, please. You must be..." "What the hell are you talking about? I really am Lily's husband. I asked you who you are," Kevin demanded. Seeing his displeasure, Lily stepped in and explained, "Kevin, relax. He's my college classmate, Colin Butterfield. He just came back from Europe and is now working for our company." Of course, there were still some things that she had not said out loud. Colin madly pursued her during their college days. But after he decided to finish his studies abroad, he abruptly left Chicago and only returned recently. When Colin came back, he tracked down Lily, hoping to win her heart. It just so happened that the Williams Company needed a talented manager, and Lily agreed to hire him based on his credentials. "So, is this employee working directly under you?" Kevin frowned slightly. Although he did not say anything else, his meaning was very clear. "What did you say? Who are you calling an employee?" Colin retorted unhappily, then added, "Don't think that you are superior to me just because you're married to Lily. After all, everything can change in an instant." Kevin's face instantly darkened upon hearing this. Who did this guy think he was? Seeing that things had become tense between the two of them, Lily warned Colin. "Colin, you better watch your mouth. Kevin is my husband, and he is definitely not someone that you can afford to offend if you want to stay in this company." Colin looked at Kevin in disbelief. He then pulled Lily aside and whispered, "Lily, how can you stay married to this piece of trash? Tell me, what part of me is not as good as him? My feelings for you have never changed since college. Don't you feel the same way?" "I'm sorry, Colin, but You were never more than a friend to me, Lily told him. At the same time, she kept cursing Colin Butterfield in her heart. What was he thinking? Across the entire city, not even Dalton Steele would dare to speak to Kevin in such a manner. Colin might have just returned to Chicago, but that wasn't an excuse. After all, he should have known who the president of the company that he was working for was. I'm sorry, but I can't accept no for an answer. Colin refused as he furiously roared at Kevin. I don't care who you are. Leave Lily immediately. If not, don't blame me for what I'll do to you. Colin, are you out of your mind? What has gotten into you? Lily scolded as her face turned sour. Call me crazy, but I'm willing to do anything to win your heart. Besides, just look at him. I am clearly way stronger than this guy. I can take him in a fight, Colin arrogantly pointed out. As his voice grew louder with each response, the argument attracted the attention of people in the parking lot. At first, they were wondering who was so blind to provoke Colin Butterfield. But when they got closer, they were shocked to see Colin throwing insults at Kevin like a madman. Does that guy have a death wish? What is he doing getting entangled with President Williams? Someone wondered. While Colin's feelings for Lily were not a secret to many of these people, they couldn't believe that he would actually confront Lily's husband, who just so happened to be the Williams Company's president. Colin, you have left me with no choice but to fire you. Pack up your things and leave, Lily declared. In her mind, Colin had crossed the line the moment he revealed his crazed obsession with her. Moreover, when she saw Kevin's gloomy face, Lily knew very well that if Colin were to keep insulting him, he would be lucky just to leave the parking lot alive. Lily. Are you really going to fire me for this? Colin was stunned. I am not only firing you, but from now on, don't bother me anymore. Otherwise, I'll have to get a restraining order on you for stalking and harassment. Lily threatened as she held Kevin's hand and left the parking lot with him. Hearing this, Colin Butterfield helplessly watched her go as a couple of security guards approached. Despite this, Kevin's expression did not change even after they arrived at his office. When they noticed this, Rachel and the others looked at each other in puzzlement, but none of them dared to ask what had happened. Is everyone here? Kevin asked with a cold tone. Yes, Kevin. The higher-ups of the Williams Company and others from our business group are all here as well. They're waiting for us in the new conference room. Emo Squire bit the bullet and carefully replied. Kevin simply nodded as he took out his phone and sent a text message. Then he left the office first. While having dinner last night, Kevin had asked Emo and the others to summon all of these people here today for a meeting. If Dalton Steele was bold enough to proceed with his plans to launch an attack against Kevin, he would likely target all of the members of his business consortium in one fell swoop. If this happened, the entire power structure of Chicago could potentially be reordered. To protect his interests, Kevin wanted to set up a new core business. As the Williams Company's strength grew stronger, the scale of their meetings also expanded. Because of this, the entire 16th floor had now been converted into a giant conference room. At the moment, the room was filled with people, who all remained silent knowing that Kevin had called this meeting. They didn't even dare to take out their phones. When Kevin and the others finally came in, everyone stood up at the same time to greet him. After looking around the conference room, Kevin sat down at the head of the table. Not wanting to waste any time, he immediately announced, I know that things have been hard on everyone recently. Given this, the main reason why I have gathered all of you together today is to tell you about my plan to set up an herbal pill refinery. Of course, this will be spearheaded by the Williams Company, while everyone else will be supporting key shareholders. Now, I would like to hear your opinions on this exciting new venture. When his voice fell, all of the business club's higher-ups, including Emo Squire and the others, were shocked. Although the Williams Company would take out a small batch of pills and put them up for auction every once in a while, these were exclusive events reserved for the wealthiest and most influential figures of Chicago. By keeping the supply low, it was not only easier for the company to manage, but the auction also earned them large profits due to the high demand. But now that Kevin actually wanted to set up a permanent pill refinery, how could it not be shocking? The originally quiet conference room instantly became lively as everyone started discussing this news. Suddenly, a senior director of the Williams Company stood up and asked tentatively, "President Williams, although your idea is very interesting, I have a question." Kevin glanced at him and replied indifferently, "Just say it." "Everyone knows that the country's herbal pill supply is basically monopolized by the Herbalist Society. If we suddenly set up a rival company that refines the same type of pills, wouldn't that be a thorn in their side?" The man pointed out their concerns. A look of surprise flashed across Kevin's eyes. He then explained, "You don't have to worry too much about that. Anyway, most of the pills that the Herbalist Society refines are actually catered for experts who wish to increase their strength. In contrast, we will not be doing any of that. Instead, our company will only refine pills that can cure diseases and injuries. So it's basically natural medicine for ordinary people." "President Williams, I have another question." Another person stood up, but this time it was one of Emo Squire's associates. "In setting up this pill refinery, we will need a large number of herbalists. As far as I know, the cost of hiring an herbalist is very high. Many of them are already working for the Herbalist Society. Beyond this issue, the most important aspect to consider is that we will need a lot of pill formulas." "You don't have to worry about that either. Did you think that I was just sitting here and talking nonsense with you this entire time? Of course, I already considered those problems and have resolved them," Kevin calmly reassured, then added, "Also, the purpose of calling everyone here today is to simply inform you about this matter. This pill refinery will be established no matter what. Perhaps you can only see the problems now, but I promise that you will all reap endless benefits from this in the future." Some of the higher-ups wanted to respond, but could see that Kevin had made up his mind, so they held their concerns. "If there's nothing else, you can all leave now. Once everything is already underway, I will naturally inform you. In the meantime, please prepare yourselves. I expect your full support on this new venture, so don't drag me down when the time comes," Kevin stated. After the other higher-ups left, Emo Squire and the others could no longer sit still. "Kevin, are you really serious about setting up a pill refinery?" Rachel asked in disbelief. As an ordinary person, she had always felt that the matter of refining medicinal pills was too out of reach. However, she never expected Kevin to present such an opportunity before them. Hearing this, Kevin replied confidently, "Of course I'm serious. In line with this, I have already asked Sandra to anticipate a group of people who will arrive in Chicago shortly. Given this, you must take care and make arrangements for them when the time comes. As long as we play our cards right, our strength will be unmatched in the future." Despite still being displeased over his and Lily's encounter with Colin Butterfield, Kevin had to set aside these feelings to hold a business meeting. Amid concerns that this would be a challenge to the Herbalist Society's control of the herbal market, Kevin calmed those fears and informed his underlings that the venture was necessary to protect their empire from Dalton Steele's plans to topple the Williams Company. Kevin wasn't just bragging when he claimed the herbal pill refinery would make the Williams Company omnipotent. Although Rachel and the others were not strong enough to fight Dalton Steele, Kevin was still firmly in charge of the situation in Chicago. At the same time, he also understood one thing. Despite already having branches in St. Louis and Detroit, the Radiance would not be able to go far in the future if the majority of its members continued to develop in seclusion. However, given that the current number of people in the Radiance had grown to such a massive scale, Kevin could only choose a portion of them to serve as the core members of the organization. By sending these people to help him with his pill refinery, He believed that his ability to protect his empire would be more than enough. After sending Emo Squire and the others away, Kevin followed Lily back to the office. "Don't you have some explaining to do?" Kevin remarked unhappily. "If you won't believe me anyway, it's useless for me to say anything," Lily retorted as she sat on the sofa with her head slightly lowered. Deep down, Kevin knew that Lily was right. After all, even when he was still just a nobody, she never did anything to let him down. Now that his status had soared to the sky, it was even more impossible for Lily to cheat on him. However, while Kevin knew that Colin Butterfield wasn't a threat, he naturally couldn't help but feel a little jealous as Lily's husband. Looking at Lily sulking on the sofa, Kevin could only take a deep breath and try to regain his composure. At the same time, in the Williams family's mansion in New York City, Thomas Williams had just finished reading some reports. But before he could move on to another document, the door of his study was suddenly thrown open forcefully from the outside. His wife, Laura, quickly walked in and placed her hands on her waist. She then scolded, "What the hell, Thomas? Your son was just beaten within an inch of his life by Kevin in Chicago, and yet you did nothing to avenge him. Also, why did you have him brought back here instead of leaving him in the hospital to recover? What are you trying to do?" Hearing this, Thomas slowly put the documents down on the table and stood up as he looked at Laura calmly. "What are you still standing there for? I don't care how strong Kevin is. Take someone with you to Chicago right now and kill that piece of trash. Otherwise, if you don't man up, I won't hesitate to demand a divorce. I can't afford to be humiliated like this." Laura shouted loudly, not caring whether she would be heard by others inside the mansion or not. Overhearing this commotion, a number of people who had originally come to talk to Thomas suddenly stopped in their tracks and did not dare to move forward toward the study. Seeing this, Thomas slowly walked to the door and gestured for them to wait for him down the hall. After making sure that there was no one else around, he discreetly closed the door. "Why did you close the door? Are you afraid of being heard and humiliated?" Laura sneered as she gave Thomas a disdainful look. Without saying a word, Thomas walked back to his desk, took out a document from the drawer, and handed it over to Laura. "What's this?" Laura frowned and asked in puzzlement. "Take a look at your son's injury report," Thomas uttered coldly. "Why? I already know that all of Ethan's limbs were broken, and I'm even aware that his spiritual energy was forcibly sucked out of his body. What else is there to see?" Laura wondered as her eyes widened even more. "Are you sure you didn't miss anything? I think you should take another look, especially at your son's blood type." Thomas's face gradually turned cold as he spoke. Just then, Laura's facial expression changed dramatically. She covered her mouth with both hands to prevent herself from making any sound. "Shouldn't you give me a good explanation? I remember Ethan's blood test results in the past. His blood type was always the same as mine. Why did it suddenly change?" Thomas asked, creating a tense atmosphere around them. "Thomas, listen to me. It's probably just a clerical error. After all, hospitals in Chicago aren't as good as the ones in New York City. There's no need to get upset over such a small thing." Laura immediately deflected with a panicked tone. "Is that so? Well, I have something else here that you should take a look at," Thomas replied as he took out another document and handed it to Laura. When Laura saw what it was, her hand started to tremble. "When I noticed that Ethan's blood type did not match with mine, I immediately asked someone to do a DNA test for us. The result confirmed that my suspicions were correct." Thomas snickered, then continued, "Laura, I really can't believe that you managed to fool me for so many years. How dare you hand me the responsibility of raising a son that isn't my own? If it wasn't for the fact that Ethan had been hospitalized, you probably would have carried this secret to your grave." No, Thomas, you misunderstood. The hospital must have made a mistake. Ethan is really your son. Don't you know how much I love you? How could I do something that would betray your trust like that?" Laura quickly tried to reassure him. However, Thomas acted as if he did not hear what she said and recounted. "Last night I sat by Ethan's bedside for the whole night and remembered something. Back when we first met, I had to compete with another man to win your heart. I always thought I defeated him, but in the end I guess he got the best of me. He managed to get you pregnant, then made me raise his son for more than 20 years. Thomas's emotions suddenly got the best of him as he slammed his palms on the desk. Due to his spiritual energy, the desk was instantly smashed into pieces. This scared Laura so badly that her heart started racing. With that, Thomas thundered, "I finally understand why you kept insisting that I arrange for Ethan to take over the family business, and also pressured me into banishing my brother and his family. This was all a part of your grand plan to pave the way for your son to inherit everything. If you had succeeded with all of that, what were you planning to do next? Were you going to kill me, then marry your son's real father?" As Thomas slowly walked toward Laura, his body was trembling more and more violently. At the same time, he emitted a terrifying aura, looking as if he was on the verge of losing control. "Thomas, don't be impulsive. Why don't you calm down so we can talk?" Laura pleaded in fear. "You lied to me for over 20 years, Laura. How do you expect me to calm down after that?" Thomas yelled. As Laura stepped backward to avoid him, she stumbled over her own feet and fell to the ground in a sorry state. When this happened, Thomas suddenly turned around and shouted toward the door, "Someone, come here right now." A few seconds later, a few of his bodyguards entered the study. Upon seeing Thomas angrily staring down at Laura, who was sitting on the ground, these men froze in their tracks. "Get her out of this house right now. No matter what happens, she can never come back here," Thomas ordered without any further explanation. For a moment, the bodyguard stood there blankly, not knowing what to say or do. Could Thomas Williams really do this to his own wife? Where would Laura go after being kicked out of the Williams family's mansion? "Didn't you hear what I said? Take her away right now," Thomas ordered his men harshly. Hearing this, the bodyguards immediately came back to their senses and did not dare to question Thomas. They then dragged Laura from the study. "What the hell are you doing? Let go of me right this instant. My husband didn't mean what he said. He was clearly just caught up in the heat of the moment." Laura tried to explain as she struggled with all of her might to free herself. Unfortunately, her strength was no match for these men. When the sound of Laura's desperate pleas was already too far away for him to hear, Thomas slowly closed his eyes and let out a long sigh. He was clearly unhappy right now with what he had just done. As his wife, Laura was the woman whom he had loved for more than 20 years. However, given that their marriage was built on one huge lie, he couldn't find it in his heart to forgive her. After all, beyond the fact that he had been led to believe that Ethan was his son this entire time, all of the advice that she had whispered into his ear over the years had left the entire Williams family practically covered in bruises and scars. After some time, Thomas suddenly opened his eyes, as if he had made some important decision. He then yelled, "Prepare the car. I'm going to Chicago."
Welcome to Sleepy Cat channel. If you like our content, please buy me a coffee using link in the description.
When Thomas Williams' wife Laura complained to him that he did nothing to avenge their son Ethan's beating by Kevin, Thomas presented to Laura hospital reports and DNA tests that proved that Ethan was not Thomas's biological son. Laura attempted to make excuses, but Thomas, realizing that Laura had lied to him and manipulated him for over 20 years to gain power for her bastard son, had Laura dragged out of the family mansion as Thomas prepared to return to Chicago to see Kevin. Back in Chicago, Kevin had just decided to let Emo Squire handle everything that had to do with setting up his pill refinery. Soon after, the people from the Radiants arrived in the city. Led by Alfred Dixon, he brought a total of 50 people with him. 12 of them were his trusted subordinates, and they were set to accompany Kevin to the ancient ruins of Lake Erie. On the other hand, the remaining 38 were considered the best out of 2,000 trained herbalists, and they were brought over to refine pills for Kevin's new company. After handing the 38 herbalists over to Emo, Kevin brought Alfred and his 12 subordinates back to Corwin Tower. As Kevin's gaze swept across these 12 people, he could tell that the strongest among them had a power base at the second stage of level 4. While the weakest was at the 6th stage of level 3. Although their strength wasn't comparable to Troy Evans and the others from the Vanguard, it was still considered pretty good overall. Mr. Williams, I can assure you that these are all capable and trustworthy subordinates. Admittedly, they may not be the strongest warriors, but their courage is invaluable. Alfred introduced them with a smile. At the same time, he glanced back at his people and immediately scolded. What are you all just standing there for? Don't you know who this person is? He is the Chancellor of the Radiants. Upon hearing this, the 12 of them hurriedly dropped to a knee and lowered their heads before Kevin and said, Greetings, Chancellor. In the Radiants, the most mysterious and powerful figure was definitely its Chancellor, Kenneth Wilkinson. After all, the Chancellor had not been seen in a very long time and was known to wear a mask during the few times that he showed himself. Moreover, since he mostly let Spencer and the others manage the Radiance's daily affairs, the majority of the organization's members had yet to even encounter him in person. Despite his elusiveness, he was unquestionably believed to be the strongest expert in the Radiance. This was largely because he managed to handily defeat the Southern School for Natural Medicine's dean, Jeffrey Bowie, in the past. Beyond that, the Chancellor also had the ability to produce pill formulas that even the Herbalist Society's higher-ups had never even seen before. Therefore, when the 12 of them found out that Kenneth Wilkinson had merely been a pseudonym, and that this ordinary-looking man in front of them was truly the Radiance's Chancellor, their hearts were understandably filled with shock at first, but they were immediately replaced by a strong sense of both fear and respect. Get up, Kevin ordered as he waved his hand at them. He then sent out a gentle force that lifted them up from the ground. As they now stood up, the 12 men were shocked by this once again. Unable to detect Kevin's power base, what kind of strength was needed to do that? Mr. Williams, what's the plan? I hope that it's something big, Alfred asked impatiently. Ever since he had begun following Kevin, he had been staying in the Radiance's headquarters, itching for an opportunity to show off his skills. Why don't you go and rob all the banks in Chicago? I'm sure that will be a big deal for a bandit like you, Kevin remarked sarcastically as he looked at him and scolded. Lake Erie is not like Blade Mountain at all. This mission is far from a simple heist. Alfred scratched the back of his head in embarrassment and replied with a simple and honest smile. I'm sorry, Mr. Williams. It's been a while, so I just got excited. As long as you say it, we will do whatever you ask of us without any complaints. Kevin sighed slightly and thought for a while. He then instructed the 12 men. You guys go and find out more about the situation first. Since the great powers already know about the ancient ruins, we have to be careful about our next move. Yes, Chancellor. After the 12 of them lowered their heads to Kevin, they immediately turned around and left. What about me, Mr. Williams? What will I do? Alfred curiously asked again. "You will come with me to see a couple of people," Kevin replied as he suddenly revealed a faint smile. An hour later, the two of them arrived at the entrance of the Healing Arts School. "What the? Mr. Williams, are we going to cause trouble here?" Alfred exclaimed as he looked at the Healing Arts School in front of him with some uneasiness in his heart. "Didn't you say that you wanted to do something big?" Kevin playfully teased. "Actually, on second thought, I wouldn't mind taking on something a bit less." Alfred's mouth couldn't help but twitch a few times as he conceded this. It wasn't that he didn't have confidence in his own strength. Rather, he knew that there were some people in the Healing Arts School that he couldn't afford to offend. After all, Wayne Ford and Harley Shepard had been famous figures among the world of experts for many years. For a moment, he couldn't understand why Kevin, who was usually such a smart and careful person, would suddenly be so reckless. However, Kevin did not give him any explanation. As he quietly stood at the school gate, he believed that the two old men had definitely received the news of his return. As for why they had not contacted him until now, Kevin wasn't sure, so he decided to take the initiative to come looking for them instead. Time passed by slowly. At the moment, the Healing Arts School was not on vacation. Since many students came and went, Kevin figured that his presence would not attract too much attention. As such, while Kevin saw many familiar faces, such as Mike Tripp and some of his other classmates, they did not seem to notice him. Otherwise, if they did, they probably did not want to talk to him. After almost another hour had passed without anything, Alfred couldn't help but ask, "Mr. Williams, what exactly are we doing here?" If they were here to cause trouble, they would have started a fight a long time ago. But if they were here to find someone, why hadn't anyone paid any attention to them until now? "Don't be in such a hurry." Kevin didn't panic, and the smile on his face didn't disappear. Hearing this, Alfred did not ask any more questions. As long as Kevin knew why they were here, he would wait patiently. As expected, less than 2 minutes later, a member of the Healing Arts School quickly walked over to them. He then looked at Kevin and said respectfully, "Mr. Williams, our deans would like to see you." "Lead the way," Kevin nodded. Soon, the three of them arrived at the dean's office. When Kevin entered the room, he saw Wayne Ford reading a book behind his desk while Harley Shepard sat by the window drinking coffee. Kevin was the first to speak and quipped, "Long time no see. Then again, it took you long enough to ask for me to come to your office." "If we knew you were coming, we wouldn't have been able to hide from you even if we wanted to," Wayne snappily retorted as he closed the book in his hand. "If you two really don't want to see me, just say so. I'll turn around and leave immediately," Kevin replied frankly. Meanwhile, Harley's eyes were currently fixed on the man who had entered with Kevin. With his strength, he could naturally tell Alfred's power base. However, when he turned his attention to Kevin, the most unbelievable thing was that he actually couldn't sense his power base. With some surprise in his eyes, Harley finally remarked, "Kid, looks like you've really soared to the sky now. You even have a level 5 expert following you." "This is all thanks to what I learned in the Healing Arts School," Kevin flattered him. The truth was that he had only studied in the Healing Arts School for a semester, and the things that he learned during that time were very little. "Your words are flattering, but we already know why you came here. However, as an independent organization, the Healing Arts School must never take a stand for any individual. That's why we don't interfere with your conflicts in Chicago," Wayne explained slowly and clearly. "I know that, but at the same time, I also know that if it wasn't for the two of you, Dalton wouldn't have done things in such an orderly manner," Kevin casually replied. "Then why did you come to see us today? Don't tell me you really just missed us," Wayne asked without changing his expression. "3 things," Kevin continued. "First, I'm sure you have heard about what happened on Lake Erie. Can you tell me more about it? I wonder if you have noticed any unusual activities from some of the other schools recently." As soon as he finished speaking, the office became silent as Wayne Ford's and Harley Shepard's faces quickly turned gloomy. Because both of their power bases were very high, the changes in their emotions reflected greatly on the surrounding atmosphere. Given this, Alfred immediately tensed up. Although he didn't know the exact power base of Kevin, he was ready to attack and sacrifice himself at any time in order for Kevin to escape if necessary.
It seems that you have truly grown quickly in Washington. I didn't think that you would be involved in this matter,
Wayne remarked with a slight frown. As expected, you do know something. Tell me more, Kevin probed, looking a little anxious. Kevin, although your current strength is not low, I advise you to not concern yourself with this matter. With the wealth that you have right now, take all of the people around you along with you and leave Chicago. Change your name and identity. If you choose to spend the rest of your life as an ordinary person, you will still be able to enjoy a life of incredible luxury. Harley tried to persuade him. Kevin's brows furrowed when he heard this. Why was Harley acting so strange all of a sudden?
Harley is right. It's best that you don't ask about what's happening at Lake Erie. Even if you know something, don't mention it to anyone. This matter involves the lives of too many people,
Wayne quickly added. At this moment, Kevin's heart was filled with confusion. He didn't understand what made these two old men say such serious words. What do you mean? Isn't the Healing Arts School known as the top organization in the Great Powers? Aren't you guys supposed to help maintain peace and order? If there really is such a threat, why are you so unwilling to take a stand now despite knowing the truth? You were the first to rally everyone against the Pinnacle. Kevin questioned as he really couldn't figure out what was going on. Why would these two old men who were so powerful be so evasive about this matter? It was as if they were deliberately turning a blind eye in fear of facing certain consequences.
Kevin, you've been to Washington, so you should know that compared to the expert forces there, we are just mere ants. Moreover, we simply can't afford to go up against the government's higher-ups.
Wayne shook his head and sighed. Could the Mavericks really be so powerful that even the government is colluding with them? Doesn't the law prevent experts from interfering with the affairs of ordinary people? In that case, isn't the government violating its own rules by doing so? Kevin pointed out the issue. You actually know about the Mavericks? Could it be that you have already reignited the war between the two factions? Harley asked in surprise. However, Wayne Ford did not dwell on what Harley said and just slowly explained.
The rules are set by those in power, but they themselves are not necessarily bound by them. Besides, this law that you speak of was actually set by the people of the upper realm. In their eyes, even certain figures with considerable strength in Washington are seen as expendable. Moreover, without the support of the upper realm behind the scenes, do you think that the Mavericks would have the courage to attack other experts without fearing the consequences?
Wayne Ford's words hit Kevin like bricks. Was everything he knew about the Mavericks wrong? After Calvin Morris pleaded with Kevin for an antidote, Kevin finally produced a white pill that he said would negate the effects of the poison. However, he cautioned that it would only last a month.
Welcome to Sleepy Cat channel. If you like our content, please buy me a coffee using link in the description.
When Thomas Williams' wife Laura
Welcome to Sleepy Cat channel. If you like our content, please buy me a coffee using link in the description.
When Kevin asked them whether they had heard anything about the matter at Lake Erie, Wayne Ford and Harley Shepard discouraged him from going there. Confused by this, Kevin questioned why they weren't willing to take part in this matter. Wayne then explained that the schools of the great powers were powerless against the higher-ups in Washington. After figuring out that the government was colluding with the Mavericks, Kevin felt that this was unfair and against the law. With this, Wayne revealed that the people of the upper realm were actually the ones in charge and secretly supported the Mavericks behind the scenes. In an instant, he suddenly felt that he was being too careless about the situation. Even though the Mavericks did not show themselves and had only asked Matthew Thames to pass on a message, he eagerly flew back to Chicago to go on this mission. Why did he have to agree in the first place? What if the real reason why the higher-ups of the Mavericks never showed their faces to him was because they were secretly afraid of him? On the other hand, Kevin knew that things weren't so simple. He might not be afraid of what the Mavericks would do to him, but what about Lily and his parents, or even Emo Squire and the others? In order to protect the safety of the people around him, he had no choice but to see this mission through. For a moment, Kevin's heart was filled with doubt. On top of the Mavericks being a thorn in his side, he really could not imagine just how powerful the forces of the upper realm were if they could suppress Wayne Ford and the others, to the point where they did not even dare to defend themselves.
Kevin, I know that these words are a blow to your plans, but what can you do about it? Besides, we are doing this for your own good. Having reached level 7 at such a young age, I admit that you have extraordinary talent. However, you still have your whole life ahead of you.
Wayne tried to persuade him in a serious tone, then added,
The Mavericks have always been cruel and merciless when they do things. They destroy those who don't obey them. As such, the best way for you to escape them is to take advantage of the fact that you are still not too deeply involved in this matter.
What about the so-called Water Guardian? Is it just a conspiracy of the Mavericks against the great powers? Kevin surmised.
You can put it that way, because the schools of the great powers have existed for so many years, the Mavericks wouldn't dare to attack them openly. So they had the government issue a warning about this threat.
Wayne explained patiently, then added,
However, the ancient ruins at the bottom of Lake Erie are indeed real. As such, the Mavericks want to use this as an opportunity for all of the forces in the great powers to kill each other and weaken their collective strength, paving the way for them to be suppressed one by one in the future.
If the Mavericks' true intentions were to spread, this news could cause an uproar among the great powers. However, those schools would still be blinded by the opportunity to obtain treasures from the ancient ruins. Given this, Kevin squeezed his fists and asked, When will the seal around Lake Erie be opened? Seeing that Kevin still planned to push through with his mission, Wayne sighed.
The seal will be lifted for all experts tomorrow.
I understand. Kevin nodded, then turned around to leave the office along with Alfred Dixon. After leaving the Healing Arts School, Kevin's face looked serious. Just now, he had only realized what Matthew Thames had avoided telling him. This so-called mission from the Mavericks was actually just an elaborate scheme to get him out of Washington and kill him at Lake Erie. Your plan is not bad, but you have forgotten one thing. Chicago is my territory. Kevin roared to himself. Just then, two figures suddenly appeared from nearby and walked straight toward Kevin. One of them, an old man, said faintly, "Follow me." Stunned for a moment by this, Kevin then told Alfred to return to Corwin Tower. Before leaving, he also instructed him to check on the Tanner brothers and inform those who had come out of seclusion to come to Chicago immediately. Given that his upcoming trip to Lake Erie was going to be extremely dangerous, he had to make preparations. After that, Kevin followed the two men for about a half an hour before they eventually stopped somewhere on the outskirts of Chicago. Of course, these two people were the Night King and Leo Hayes.
"We have already heard about your matter with the Mavericks. Now we would like to hear your thoughts,"
Leo Hayes suddenly brought up. "The Mavericks want to kill me, but I will never let them get what they want. Not only will I not die, I will also destroy their plans in front of all of the other schools and obtain what's inside the ancient ruins," Kevin declared resolutely. Although the Night King and Leo Hayes were usually mysterious and elusive, they would always appear and save him at critical moments. Moreover, Kevin could also gather from their conversation just now that both of them had been secretly watching him all this time.
"The first part is right, but you don't have to do the second part."
The Night King spoke without emotion and then added,
"Unraveling the Mavericks' conspiracy will only bring you more harm and no benefits, completely tearing apart any remaining room for discussion between you two. When that happens, the Mavericks will definitely mobilize all of their forces to kill not just you, but also all of your family and friends."
Coming from the Night King, Kevin could not help but be shocked when he heard this. "Then I can only be at their mercy?" Kevin asked unhappily. Hearing this, the Night King turned around and scolded him angrily.
"Who told you to be so arrogant and cause trouble in Washington so soon? Do you know what it means to do great things? With your strength and potential, you can easily sweep across Washington in due time, but right now you are still far from ready to take on the Mavericks."
Kevin simply lowered his head, not daring to say anything against the Night King.
"All right. Now is not the time to argue about who's right or wrong."
Leo looked at Kevin and said with an indifferent tone,
"Since you've already agreed to this mission, there is a treasure called the Sky-Dividing Flower inside the ancient ruins. That thing is very important. You have to get it back for us at all costs. Do you hear me?"
Before Kevin could say anything, the Night King huffed.
"By the way, you will encounter a lot more obstacles this time. Not only from the other schools, but even the government in the upper realm have sent people there. So with everyone out there for the same treasure and ready to kill for it, you must be careful. Don't bring shame to us."
When the Night King finished his words, Kevin simply gave him a conflicted look.
"Don't give me that look. Besides, your power base has already broken through to level 7. And I know that you've been practicing the Blue Storm technique with Leo. Anyway, as long as you are able to obtain the Sky-Dividing Flower, the two of us will protect you in case something happens."
The Night King reassured Kevin as he returned to his usual calm and steady state. "Don't worry. I won't let you guys down. I will definitely complete this mission successfully." Kevin held his head high and answered with a firm tone. By the time he returned to Corwin Tower, it was already past 3 o'clock in the afternoon. While two of the Tanner brothers were still trying to break through to the 4th stage of level 5, Elijah, Sage, and Tyson Tanner had all fortunately come out of their seclusion and flown into Chicago. "Mr. Williams," Elijah Tanner and the other two greeted at the same time. Glancing at the three men, Kevin nodded his head in approval. "I can tell that two of you have reached the 5th stage of level 5, while the other is already at the 6th stage. Not bad, you guys. It's all because of the formation that you left behind at the Radiance, along with countless medicinal pills that we were able to progress so quickly in such a short period of time," Elijah explained with gratitude. Back when they were still Jake Morris's subordinates, there was a limit to the number of medicinal pills that were allocated for them every month, and they needed to carry out all kinds of tasks in order to obtain them. However, ever since they started following Kevin, there was a group of herbalists in the Radiance who specialized in refining pills for them. Although Kevin was their boss, he had never forced them to do anything in exchange for these, other than provide their unwavering loyalty. Beyond the fact that they were given so many resources, they also had the freedom to train all day and night, hoping to develop their strength for the sake of repaying Kevin's kindness one day. This mission in Lake Erie will be very difficult. As I have said before, there's a chance that people could lose their lives whether we succeed or not. So for those who were unwilling to take that risk, you may head back to the Radiance's headquarters right now, and I won't blame you for it," Kevin offered.
"We will do our best to serve you no matter what, Mr. Williams."
All of them shouted at the same time. "Thank you. If we are able to come back alive from this mission, I promise to bring all of you with me to Washington," Kevin replied, feeling gratitude in his heart. After all, now that he had a large group of people who were willing to support him until the end, he no longer felt like he was alone on this mission. One more thing. At Lake Erie, I will appear as Chancellor Kenneth Wilkinson of the Radiants. So if we succeed, this mission will increase the prestige of our organization, Kevin fervently declared. Later that night, when Kevin returned to the Salix Leaf Complex, he was surprised to find that Lily had cooked him dinner, as she greeted him with a smile. During dinner, Lily took the initiative to tell him all about Colin Butterfield, reassuring him that nothing had ever happened between them. With Kevin having already gotten over his jealousy by then, this matter was quickly forgotten. At the same time, both of them felt that sharing their thoughts and feelings with one another had also made their marriage even stronger. After making sure that Lily was sleeping soundly, Kevin quietly slipped out of the apartment and met up with Elijah Tanner and the others. They then drove off toward Lake Erie. After a couple of hours, they finally arrived just outside the lake, where long lines of people covered the entire shore. With several officers and security guards standing side by side, they were there to make sure that no one was allowed to enter unless they were an expert. Suddenly, there was a commotion in the crowd. With a strong fragrance spreading across the lakeshore, the female members of the union entered the scene. "Stand aside. This spot is ours," Renee Silver immediately roared to drive everyone else away. "It's been a long time since we last saw each other, but your temper is still as violent as ever," Paul Vaughn teased as he walked over slowly with the students of the Central Alternative Healing Academy.
"Paul is right. When will you lighten up?"
Theodore Honnold added as he approached the students of the Southwest School of Healing. "What did you two old men say? Tell me again if you have the guts." Renee glared at them and retorted fiercely. After the Reaper Squad took Lily away from the Union's headquarters, her status within the organization plummeted. So when she heard that some ancient ruins had resurfaced in Lake Erie, she quickly volunteered to lead a team here in order to get back into the Union's good graces.
"The three of you seem to be in a really great mood. Is it too late to join in on the fun?"
A low and deep voice suddenly sounded. Just then, a tall, middle-aged man with a scar on his face walked out with 20 or so students. When Paul Vaughn and the others saw this man, their facial expressions changed slightly. Of course, they knew his identity. He was the vice president of the Southwest School of Healing, Vernon Bowie. However, compared to his older brother Jeffrey, he was a much less accomplished figure within the Great Powers.
"Vernon, why are you the one who came out today? Where's Jeffrey?"
Paul asked with a slight frown.
"You mean my useless brother? How could he have the courage to participate in something like this? Naturally, he found a convenient place to hide, leaving me with no choice but to take his place today,"
Vernon replied with a cold smile. Before Paul Vaughn and the others could react, another voice suddenly sounded. "Is he really hiding somewhere, or are you just trying to cover up the truth? You should know better than anyone else." Upon hearing this, Vernon Bowie's facial expression changed drastically as everyone looked around and saw a man in white walking out of the crowd. Although they could not see his face clearly, it was impossible not to recognize the white mask that he wore.
"Kenneth Wilkinson? I didn't expect to see the Radiants here today."
Theodore's face carried a trace of shock to be in the company of such power and importance. As the representatives of the different schools started arriving one by one at Lake Erie, Paul Vaughn and Theodore Honnold were teasing Renee Silver about her temper when the students of the Southeast School for Natural Medicine arrived. However, after seeing that they were led by Vernon Bowie instead of Jeffrey, Paul wondered where his older brother was. When Vernon explained that Jeffrey was too afraid to go and had gone into hiding, A voice cast doubt on whether this was true. Upon hearing this, everyone looked around and they were shocked to see the Radiance as Chancellor. Even though they were still unaware that Kenneth Wilkinson and Kevin were the same person, his affiliation with the Radiance alone was enough to earn him disdainful looks from everyone. If it wasn't for the fact that Kevin had the Radiance behind him, many believed that he would have been long dead by now. Moreover, the Radiance's Chancellor, Kenneth Wilkinson, was considered to be the most mysterious and elusive person within the Great Powers. Not knowing that he and Kevin were actually the same person, it was as if this powerful expert had suddenly just appeared out of nowhere. No one had ever seen the Chancellor's face, and that made the unknown of his identity all the more dangerous. Shortly after the Radiance's establishment, it was precisely this person who confronted and defeated Jeffrey Bowie in front of so many people to make a statement. At that time, Paul Vaughn and the others could see that Kenneth Wilkinson hadn't even used his full strength, which was why no one dared to offend him. Just then, a murderous look flashed across Vernon Bowie's face as he questioned,
"What do you mean by what you just said?"
As far as everyone here knows, Jeffrey Bowie is not the type to shy away from a fight, let alone something as big as this. So I'm just wondering the real reason why he isn't here today. Kevin, disguised as Kenneth Wilkinson, replied without even looking at Vernon.
"I don't care who you are. If you continue to accuse me of lying, be prepared to face the consequences,"
Vernon retorted as he clenched his fists tightly. However, his true thoughts were completely different from what he had displayed. With his greatest secret seemingly known by this mysterious person, Vernon was momentarily at a loss for how to handle it. Still, without any solid evidence, he knew that he had no reason to panic. Besides, he had the strength of the Southeast School for Natural Medicine behind him. "Do you think you deserve to boast so shamelessly in front of me? Judging from your aura, it seems that you're just a weakling who has not even reached the 4th stage of level 5, Kevin observed smugly while standing behind Vernon. Hearing this, Vernon Bowie frowned slightly. Although his strength was not as good as Jeffrey's, the Southeast School for Natural Medicine's combat skills had always been known to be fierce and overbearing, making him feel as if his body was invincible. At the same time, no one in the crowd said a word, and just curiously watched to see how the situation would unfold. In any case, they were all here for the treasure in the ancient ruins. Now that these two were seemingly about to fight, it would be better for the others if at least one of them died. That way it would reduce the competition even before the race to the treasure officially began.
"Your words are simply too much. If you don't give me a good explanation right now, I will never let this matter rest,"
Vernon warned as he gnashed his teeth. If it was any other time, he would have made a move a long time ago. However, today he was a little cautious and was worried that Kenneth Wilkinson had something up his sleeve due to his arrogance. In fact, this was the first time Vernon had encountered him in person. After hearing about the battle between Kenneth and his brother, he knew that he was clearly no match for him. However, Vernon had already made up his mind. If Kenneth Wilkinson continued to push him, he would have no choice but to fight him, even if it cost him his life. At the very least, he would be able to defend the honor of the Southeast School for Natural Medicine. "If you really have the strength, you can come up and fight me, instead of just standing there and cursing me all day," Kevin replied casually as if Vernon was not even a small threat.
"All right, then you leave me with no choice,"
Vernon uttered. After taking a deep breath, a golden light radiated from his body. With that, Vernon stomped violently on the ground, instantly forming a hole under his feet as he lunged at Kevin like a cheetah hunting its prey. Despite seeing Vernon charging toward him menacingly, Kevin just stood there without moving. He didn't even have any intention to attack. Seeing this, the surrounding people were filled with shock. What the hell? Is he really not going to do anything? The Southeast School for Natural Medicine's combat skills are no joke. Someone shouted in disbelief.
In my opinion, Kenneth Wilkinson is probably scared senseless and doesn't know how to react.
Another sneered.
I thought he was a very powerful expert. Now it seems that he's just full of words and unable to back them up.
A third one mocked. Upon arriving in front of Kevin, Vernon threw out a punch. A sense of ridicule led Paul Vaughn to speak.
You only know how to put on an act. Don't think you can look down on Vernon just because you defeated Jeffrey back then. Although his power base isn't as high as his brother's, the Southeast School for Natural Medicine's elite combat skills are more than enough to make up for a small gap in strength. So unless you're at least 3 stages higher than him, don't even think about underestimating Vernon.
Paul was telling the truth. While Jeffrey Bowie had the higher power base among the two, Vernon was the more skilled warrior and had already mastered the Southeast School for Natural Medicine's unique combat technique. But when Vernon's fist was about to hit Kevin's chest, a confident smile appeared on Vernon's face. However, a second later, Kevin quickly raised his hand and easily caught Vernon's fist, silencing everyone who was watching them at that moment. Such a shame. It seems that you are even a little worse than your brother, Kevin remarked slowly. Completely shocked by this, Vernon Bowie did not have the time to answer him. With his feet firmly planted on the ground, he tried his best to pull his hand back. But to his surprise, it didn't work. Kevin held his hand tightly, not giving him any chance to escape. Meanwhile, Elijah Tanner and the rest of the Radiance's members had smug looks on their faces. How could someone who hadn't even reached the 4th stage of level 5 be worthy to fight Kevin? Since I'm in a good mood today, I'll spare your life, Kevin shouted as he forcefully pulled Vernon forward. At the same time, his other hand struck Vernon's chest. Even though Kevin had controlled the intensity of his strike, Vernon flew backward as if he had been hit by a freight train. With a heavy thud, he fell to the ground and spat out a large mouthful of blood. The surrounding crowd was stunned. They had never thought that the elusive Chancellor of the Radiance would be so strong. However, Paul Vaughn and the other leaders, who were much stronger and more experienced than their students, clearly understood the severity of the matter. Beyond the casual display of power that they just saw, the most terrifying thing was that they hadn't sensed any spiritual energy coming out of Kenneth Wilkinson's body this entire time.
Could it be that he has already broken through to level 7?
Paul gasped in disbelief.
That's impossible. The last expert within the great powers who managed the same feat was a legendary figure from many years ago.
Theodore Honnold retorted, then added,
Besides, how old is Kenneth Wilkinson? In my opinion, his power base is just likely broken through to level 5, and he must just have some kind of item on him that can shield his spiritual energy from being easily detected.
What you said makes a lot more sense,
Paul agreed. Compared to the possibility of Kenneth Wilkinson being a level 7 expert, they were more willing to believe any other explanation. After all, breaking through to level 7 was not only an achievement, but it was an extremely rare occurrence that gave experts the right to enter the upper realm. Furthermore, they could tell from his voice that Kenneth Wilkinson was just a young man. If he had truly managed to break through to level 7, how could the rest of them ever hope to survive against him? Not even their many years of experience over him would be enough to beat him. Still, given that he was able to overwhelm Vernon Bowie with just one move, they could tell that Kenneth Wilkinson's power base was at least at level 5. Just then, the students of the Southeast School for Natural Medicine quickly rushed toward Vernon Bowie, helped him up from the ground, and looked at the people of the Radiance vigilantly. At the same time, Elijah Tanner and the others from the Radiance took a step forward together and raised their heads back at them. Seeing that the situation had escalated once again, a government official suddenly stepped in to intervene. He then pointed toward the lake and said,
Everyone, I am the person in charge of escorting you all to your ship, Trevor McCandless. Since you are all experts, I couldn't have interfered with the way you handled things between the two of you. However, let me remind you that while we've temporarily sealed off this part of Lake Erie for you, this is still a public place. If you cause too much of a disturbance, I will have no choice but to shut things down before you even begin.
I'm sorry for what happened earlier, Mr. McCandless. But please tell these people who don't know what's good for them that while I don't mind ants living in this world, I wouldn't mind stepping on them either if they got on my nerves, Kevin said casually. However, no one doubted his words this time. After all, a ruthless man who could injure Vernon Bowie with one move was not someone they could afford to offend. For a moment, all the schools were reevaluating the status of the Radiants. At the same time, Trevor McCandless didn't expect Kevin to say this, but he still smiled and agreed.
The Chancellor of the Radiants is right. Mr. Wilkinson, you may bring your men and board the ship first. We don't have much time left, so please move quickly.
Hearing this, Kevin didn't look back at the others as he and the rest of the Radiants boarded the ship. Over the next half hour, members of various schools boarded the ship one after another. At the sound of the horn, a total of 3 ships sailed out in a majestic manner. For many of the younger students, this was their first time ever on a boat this large. As such, once the initial excitement had passed, several of them started getting seasick and felt like they were about to vomit. On the deck, Kevin stood by the guardrail, feeling the breeze blowing by him while being surrounded by a dozen or so Radiance members who were all on high alert. Mr. Williams, have you noticed that something strange is going on? As Elijah Tanner spoke, he pointed at the blue ship on their left, then the red ship on their right. What's wrong? Kevin asked in confusion. I noticed that everyone from the great powers boarded this ship that we're on. Even if the government had prepared the other ships for backup, why did they need 3? Elijah observed, then added. Also, I just sense that the ship on our right is full of experts, and the weakest of them is at the first stage of level 5. On the other hand, I couldn't detect any presence of spiritual energy from the ship on our left, but something tells me that a dangerous aura lies within. These words instantly attracted Kevin's attention. Until Elijah had mentioned it, he really didn't notice this point. Beyond the threat of the ship on the right, he suddenly felt uneasy about the ship on the left. At first, he simply thought that the ship without any spiritual energy flowing was just filled with ordinary people. But come to think of it, why would the government unnecessarily risk ordinary people's lives by going to the ancient ruins? Even those students with low power bases from the other schools were unwittingly sending themselves to their deaths. Kevin thought for a while, then uttered, Looks like that ship either has an item or a formation that's preventing us from detecting the spiritual energy of those who are on board. Puzzled by this, Elijah argued, But why would they hide this from the others? Isn't this trip to the ancient ruins an opportunity for the various schools to show off their strength? Just like what the Union tried to do upon their arrival a while ago, whoever is able to defeat the others will be the one who can earn the right to obtain the treasure.
As long as they don't provoke us, who cares who they are? Otherwise, we will surely deal with them,
Sage Tanner interrupted. As Kevin looked back at the ship on the left, he frowned slightly under his mask. All of a sudden, one of the Radiance members yelled,
Stop right there! You can't pass through without the Chancellor's permission.
Who could be trying to approach? Sensing that Kevin had seemingly caught on to his lie about Jeffrey Bowie's true status, Vernon was forced to fight him to defend his school's honor, but was easily defeated, much to the crowd's shock. A government official, Trevor McCandless, stepped in to restore order and then arranged for everyone to board the ship. As they sailed on Lake Erie, Elijah Tanner wondered why 3 ships were needed. With everyone from the great powers all in one ship, another ship on the right was mysteriously filled with level 5 experts, while the ship on the left seemed to be hiding its true strength altogether. Kevin and the others turned around to see Trevor McCandless standing in front of a couple of the Radiance's members. He was holding 2 glasses of wine.
Don't misunderstand. I am just here to have a friendly chat with your chancellor,
Trevor reassured them with a smile. The man in front of him hesitated for a moment and turned to look at Kevin, who was standing by the guardrail. After getting his signal, Elijah Tanner ordered,
"It's all right. Let them through."
When Trevor arrived in front of Kevin, he extended his arm to hand over a glass of wine to Kevin and remarked,
"You have tight security around you, Mr. Wilkinson. Anyway, I didn't expect that your power base would be so high earlier against Vernon Bowie."
Kevin lowered his eyes and looked at the glass of wine in front of him, but instead of taking it, he gently pushed the glass back to Trevor. "I'm sorry, Mr. McCandless. I'm not really much of a drinker," Kevin replied indifferently.
"Oh, that's unfortunate."
A hint of displeasure flashed across Trevor's eyes when he said this.
"If you have anything else to say, hurry up and say it. Otherwise, you may go back where you came from,"
Sage Tanner retorted harshly. "What did you say? Mr. McCandless is a government official. How can you be so rude?" Kevin scolded him in a low voice. When he turned his attention back to Trevor, he then eased his tone and asked, "May I know why you came here to find me?"
"It's nothing too important, but since it will still take some time before we reach our destination, I decided to use this opportunity to get to know you a little better while passing the time,"
Trevor explained as he took a sip of wine. Hearing this, Kevin narrowed his eyes and asked, "Is that so? Well, what do you want to know?"
"There are too many things to ask. For starters, where did you come from?"
Trevor stared into Kevin's eyes and continued,
"As far as I know, this is just the second time that you have appeared in public. The last time was when the Radiance was first established, and on both occasions you just so happened to fight with the leaders of the Southeast School for Natural Medicine. Is this a coincidence, or are you deliberately using them to establish your prestige?"
Hearing this, Kevin could tell that Trevor's words had a deeper meaning. "Mr. McCandless, with all due respect, I prefer to keep my personal matters to myself, so I hope that you can respect my privacy," Kevin replied softly but firmly.
"All right, fair enough. Let's talk about some other matters instead. I wonder where the Radiance is located now. Can I visit your headquarters sometime in the future?"
Trevor's tone became more and more lively, and the smile on his face grew with every word as he added,
"Also, according to what I know, the Radiance is growing stronger day by day, and from what I've seen earlier, it is no longer suitable for you to settle for small fights with these other schools. Given this, I wonder if you have ever thought of working for the government."
"Mr. McCandless, our headquarters is simple and crude, and there is nothing impressive about it, so it would only be a waste of your time and effort to go. Also, regarding what you said about serving the government, who exactly are you working for?" Kevin continued to speak calmly. "Anyway, I find the internal structure of the government too complicated, and I don't like being restricted by too many rules and regulations. In short, I am used to freedom, and I would rather stay that way for the rest of my life." Before Trevor could react, Kevin added, "If you have nothing else to ask, I would like to be alone for a while." After hearing Kevin's not-so-subtle way of asking him to leave, a cold glint flashed across Trevor's eyes. However, he didn't say anything and quickly left.
Who does he think he is trying to recruit us?"
Sage Tanner sneered with a disdainful look on his face. "Sage, we are still on the ship. Don't speak nonsense, otherwise you will cause trouble for Mr. Williams," Tyson Tanner said as he tried to calm him down.
"Tyson is right. Sage, it's time for you to control your temper."
Elijah Tanner also lectured him with some annoyance.
"I just don't like people like him. Besides, isn't it just some puppet with a title? What's the big deal?"
Sage stubbornly argued. Staring at Trevor McCandless's back as he left, Kevin had a feeling that this person's unassuming appearance hid many secrets. And for some reason, Kevin strangely felt a sense of familiarity with him. At that moment, Alfred Dixon hung up the phone and walked over with a grim face.
Mr. Williams, I just received news that the Alliance's headquarters was on fire a few days ago. Unfortunately, due to the poison of the evil pill acting up, the Alliance director was unable to escape the fire and tragically died. Because of this, the Alliance leader was so sad over his wife's death that he locked himself in his room and has not allowed anyone to enter.
What? Kevin instantly froze in shock. Alfred tried to explain.
It's true, sir. Some time ago, their Sergeant-at-Arms, Lee Titchener, was seriously injured by someone, causing his reputation to be greatly reduced. Many people in the Alliance were unconvinced of his abilities, causing an internal conflict.
Kevin didn't pay attention to what he said after that. As far as he knew, the Alliance was heavily guarded. How could someone suddenly start a fire? In addition, he had already removed the evil pill's poison from Selena Salem before, so it was impossible for her to still be suffering from its effects. None of it made any sense. For a moment, Kevin's heart was filled with regret, thinking that he should have gotten Selena out of the Alliance's headquarters back when she had asked him to. After all, he could have made arrangements and hid her in the Radiance's headquarters.
Are you okay, Mr. Williams?
Elijah Tanner called out in concern.
I'm fine.
Kevin waved his hand, signaling him and the others to leave him alone. At the same time, Trevor McCandless, who had returned to his room, immediately made a call.
I tried my best, but Kenneth Wilkinson is very cautious. I have a bad feeling that he knows something, Trevor reported. How about the subordinates? Is there a chance to make a move against them?
A low voice came from the other end of the line.
It seems that nobody on this team has a power base below level 5. At the same time, they have concealed their auras well, so none of the other schools have sensed just how powerful they are yet. Given this, it looks like we don't have any clear opening to attack them.
Trevor responded truthfully.
You should keep an eye on them secretly to prevent them from altering the others.
The person on the other end of the line instructed before adding,
As for that piece of trash Vernon Bowie, if you have the chance, you know what to do.
Understood, Trevor exclaimed as their phone call ended right after. As Trevor tapped on the table gently and looked at the picture of Kenneth Wilkinson on his phone, a cold smile appeared on his face. He then muttered,
I've already given you a chance, but some people just don't know what's good for them.
Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away from Lake Erie, a group of people were resting by a small stream. Their faces looked extremely fatigued, but their eyes were filled with excitement. Director, we're currently about a dozen miles away from Washington. For your safety, we will set up a temporary camp nearby. After that, I will send 2 people to Washington to gather some information before we proceed. A woman reported respectfully. These dozen people were none other than Selena Salem and the others who escaped from the Alliance's headquarters. Afraid that their whereabouts would be exposed, they did not dare to enter any of the big cities along the way. Apart from setting aside time for 2-hour naps and meals, the rest of their days were spent traveling from one small nondescript town to another. That's good. Just remind them to be careful, Selena reiterated as she ate an apple. Deep down, the closer she got to Washington, the more excited she became in her heart. At the same time, her subordinates would never dare to slack off. After all, as long as they succeeded in finding Kevin, they would be able to regain their long-awaited freedom. Back on Lake Erie, the 3 ships had been sailing on its surface for almost half an hour. From the ship's deck, everyone could see a small island with no vegetation. Suddenly, the 2 ships on the left and right changed directions, as if they were going to arrive at the island from different angles. When the ship full of experts from the great power stopped moving, Trevor McCandless announced, Everyone, your destination is ahead, but the island is surrounded by reefs.
Since this ship cannot go any nearer without being damaged, you must find a way to get to the island from this point. Otherwise, if you are afraid that you don't have the ability, then you can stay on the ship."
Do you think that we can't reach the island from this distance?
Renee Silver snorted as she held her sword and called out to her fellow Union members, "Follow me." With that, Renee took the lead as she jumped from the deck and charged toward the island, followed by the rest of the members of the Union. However, just as they were about to land on the island, some of them seemed to be blocked by some sort of protective barrier. Because of this, people could only let out painful cries as they helplessly fell into the water. Fortunately, Renee and the others reacted in time as they immediately took out their ropes and bound their waists to those in the water in order to help them stay afloat. But before they could do anything else, a couple of lampreys suddenly began to attack from underwater. In a state of brief panic and rage, Renee and the others pulled out their swords to scare the lampreys away.
I wasn't able to make this clear earlier, but there is a protective barrier in the air above the island. This prevents experts who are below level 5 from entering. In addition, the island is surrounded by lampreys and other dangerous creatures, so everyone must be careful," Trevor shouted while holding a megaphone to address everyone.
"Why didn't you say so earlier?" Renee seethed in anger as she pointed her sword at him.
"Miss Silver, you were the one who was being too arrogant and impulsive. You rushed out with your fellow members before I could finish explaining the situation to everyone,"
Trevor replied casually. Although Renee was clearly upset and furious over this matter, Trevor McCandless was a government official, so she didn't dare to make a move on him. The reason why she had volunteered to go first was because she wanted to seize the opportunity to show the other schools that the Union was superior to them. However, after being embarrassed just now, she could only swallow this loss. Following Trevor's words and seeing what had happened to the Union, the other schools decided to leave those with low power bases behind on the ship. However, when they saw Kenneth Wilkinson leading his entire team to the island, their faces were filled with shock. They never thought that the people from the Radiance would all be at level 5 or higher, and this instantly put a huge target on their backs as everyone else's main competition. "This place is dangerous, so everyone must be careful," Kevin reminded his men in a serious tone. "Can I count on you to ensure my safety? I need your support to come back alive." "Yes, Chancellor," everyone answered respectfully. Given that the island was huge, all of the other schools quickly led their people in different directions. However, Kevin and the Radiants remained standing right where they were.
"Mr. Williams, let's move as soon as possible. Otherwise, all the good stuff will be taken by the others,"
Sage Tanner urged impatiently. "There's no need for us to hurry over nothing," Kevin remarked as he turned his head and looked back at the ship behind them.
"Mr. Williams, you're not simply thinking of letting everyone else fight to the death before coming in to take all the treasure, are you?"
Elijah Tanner tried to guess Kevin's intention. "Not exactly. I just think that the treasure we're looking for might not really be on this island, if you know what I mean," Kevin replied meaningfully.
"If the treasure isn't on the surface of the island, could it still be at the bottom of the lake?"
Tyson Tanner asked with a puzzled expression. Kevin's eyes let out a light that indicated he, and only he, knew the answer.
Hello my dears Benneck subscribers, please do subscribe and we welcome to our channel. We are invited to buy. Hello my dears Benneck subscribers, please do subscribe and we welcome to our channel. We are invited to buy me a coffee with below link.
As they were faced with the strange yet powerful warriors guarding the entrance of the tunnel, Greg Fantilli, the Morris brothers, and Kevin all agreed to form a temporary alliance. They also agreed to choose 5 people from each of their contingents to lead the charge. While the others shrank back at the thought of being selected, all of the members of the Radiants were eager to volunteer. Kevin volunteered himself, drawing the admiration of all of the subordinates of the others. As Kevin led the charge, he unleashed the Blue Storm technique, shocking Greg Fantilli and the others. Two powerful bursts of energy clashed against one another, and for the Union. However, Trevor McCandless informed everyone that a formation had been set up to prevent anyone with a power base below level 5 from stepping foot on the island. As such, everyone was shocked when the entire group from the Radiants was able to go. At that point, everyone from all of the different schools set off in different directions, while Kevin stayed back. When Elijah Tanner asked Kevin why they weren't following, Kevin said that he believed the treasure they were looking for was most likely not on the surface of the island. The reason why Elijah Tanner and the others didn't pick up on it was because their power bases weren't high enough. Kevin was different. When his power base reached level 7, his entire perception of the world around him was different. Kevin could clearly feel that the entire island was filled with some kind of deathly aura. If he stayed there for a long enough period of time, it was very likely that his power base would be affected by it. When he came here, he also sensed that the predators around the island were actually quite far away from the shore. It was obvious that there was a layer of isolation between them and the island. Use spiritual energy to bring in enough oxygen. Let's go to the water and take a look, Kevin said. Experts were also human. They could use only spiritual energy to hold their breath for a short period of time. They would not die from a lack of oxygen as quickly as an ordinary person, but if they wanted to stay underwater for a very long period of time, they could only hold their breath for a slightly longer period of time than anyone else. Unless one broke through to a very high level, they could only use spiritual energy to form something of a protective layer to store enough oxygen. After receiving Kevin's order, the dozen or so people started circulating their spiritual energy and followed him into the water. Once they entered the water, everyone immediately felt that something was wrong. Although the water at this stage had some coldness to it, it was not exactly bone-chilling. Quickly dive. Kevin took the lead and swam toward the depths of the water. The low temperature of the water would cause the spiritual energy in their bodies to flow faster. There was a limit to the time they could stay underwater, so they had to investigate more quickly. About 30 seconds later, Kevin and the others were still diving. The depth was beyond their expectations. Suddenly, Kevin sensed something was wrong. There was a fiery red whirlpool that kept spinning at a very slow speed, but he could feel a strong heat coming from it. Kevin made a hand gesture to the group and approached the vortex. When they were about 50 feet away from the whirlpool, the spinning speed suddenly increased dramatically. A strong suction force was released, and even Kevin's power base could not resist it. He tried to determine the source of the suction as he and everyone else was sucked in. At the same time, the boat stopped near the island. The atmosphere on the boat had become much more relaxed than it had been before.
Everyone, in order to prevent you from getting bored while you wait, we have prepared drinks and pastries for everyone.
Trevor McCandless clapped his hands and said. Following some light conversation, several people presented decadent pastries and an array of cocktails. Many people with low power bases took glasses of wine from the trays one after another, laughing and teasing in a relaxed manner. Suddenly, one of them shook his head a few times.
What the hell? I don't think I'm still seasick, but why is my head so dizzy? Don't you come any closer. You've been drinking after being seasick. I don't need you throwing up on me.
Another person raised the wine glass in his hand in disdain and added,
Your alcohol tolerance is so weak. You have to learn how to drink like this.
Just as he put the wine glass to his lips, this person's head also started to feel dizzy. Such symptoms appeared suddenly for all of the others, one after another. After the first person fell onto the deck, more and more people fainted one after another. When the last one of them fainted, the smile on Trevor McCandless's face disappeared.
A bunch of trash. Do you really think your power base is high?
Trevor McCandless casually threw the wine glass onto the deck, took out his walkie-talkie and said,
I've successfully put them down. You can come and collect the food.
Roger that. We'll be there in 2 minutes,
a low voice echoed. Soon, 2 boats rushed over. A group of people in black uniforms carried the unconscious people away. Meanwhile, Kevin suddenly opened his eyes. He jumped up and looked around vigilantly. The surrounding light was a little dim and the air was filled with the suffocating smell of dust. An oil lamp was placed beside a wall every 10 steps. No one knew what kind of material the oil lamp was made of. It was even harder to determine how many years the lamp had been burning. The surroundings seemed to have been carved out by humans. The ground was covered with a thick layer of stone. Although a long time had clearly passed since anyone had been there was not a trace of dust. Is that it? Kevin asked aloud as he looked around and instantly understood. The vortex earlier was some kind of special entrance. At that moment, he heard Elijah Tanner and the others. Luckily, they were sucked inside at the same time. They were all lying on the ground not far away from him. He first checked their conditions. After confirming that they were safe, he woke them up.
What's the situation?
Alfred Dixon shook his head quickly and asked. I'm not exactly sure, Kevin said.
Well, since we've come this far, let's go inside and search the place. What if we come across some ancient treasures?
Sage Tanner said with excitement. Although Elijah Tanner and Tyson Tanner did not speak, they frowned slightly. Don't think too much about that. The most important thing right now is to find a way out first. Otherwise, no matter how much treasure we find, we would only be waiting for a slow death here. Kevin extinguished Sage Tanner's excitement with his indifferent tone. After scanning the surroundings, Elijah Tanner said,
There are so many passageways. Which one should we take?
Everyone fell silent after hearing this question. Since it was an ancient ruin, they could easily guess that this place must be filled with danger. If they were not careful, they might be doomed.
The third path on your left.
The Night King's voice suddenly sounded in Kevin's mind. Although he didn't know how the Night King did it, Kevin believed that his mentor would never harm him or lead him astray. Follow me, Kevin said as he decisively stepped in that direction. It looked like it had been built by human hands. There were many human-shaped statues on both sides of the path. There was an oil lamp in each of the statues' right hands. Some of them had already been extinguished, but some were still burning brightly. Be careful, Kevin frowned. He had a sense of uneasiness about their surroundings. As soon as Kevin finished speaking, the stone slab under Sage Tanner's feet suddenly caved in. With a loud crack, the deafening sound of the slab echoed in the quiet environment. In the next second, everyone focused their eyes on Sage Tanner.
What are you doing?
Elijah Tanner asked angrily.
I didn't do anything,
Sage Tanner said as his entire body tensed up. His left foot, which had been stretched out, no longer seemed to be a part of his body. He froze on the stone slab, not daring to make any movements. This proved that Sage Tanner was not as stunned as he looked on the surface. He understood that any carelessness now could cost him his life.
What should we do now?
Elijah Tanner asked as he and Tyson Tanner looked at Kevin anxiously. Look around. We need to find something heavier and put it on that stone slab. Then Sage will slowly lift up his foot, Kevin said in an exacting manner. He didn't dare to be careless. Everyone immediately began looking around. Fortunately, there were plenty of rocks, so they quickly came up with enough to replace Sage Tanner's weight. You have to slowly lift your foot. Don't be nervous. Kevin took a deep breath and said. Sage Tanner's forehead was covered with sweat. But when he was about to lift it up in front of everyone, he suddenly squatted down.
Sage, What the hell are you doing? Elijah Tanner urged him. Hurry up and lift your leg. I don't know what's wrong. My leg is numb. I can't move it.
Sage Tanner took a deep breath and rubbed his legs hard with both hands for a while before standing up again. A few seconds later, Sage finally stepped off of the sunken stone slab. Kevin and the others looked around. They were ready to deal with any sudden situation. Fortunately, the stone slab did not bounce back up. There was no unusual movement in their surroundings, so they finally began to let their guard down.
I'm fine, Sage Tanner shouted.
He was so excited that he looked like a child. He almost jumped up and down on the spot. Before Kevin could let out a long sigh, the sunken stone slab flew upward. Following that, a few piercing sounds were heard and a handful of sharp arrows instantly shot out from above their heads.
Be careful,
Kevin shouted loudly. Fortunately, the people from the Radiance were anything but weak. Hearing Kevin's warning, they quickly reacted. They kept moving left and right to dodge the dozens of arrows coming their way. After a few waves of arrows, Kevin and the others were not hurt at all.
I expected mechanisms like this, but honestly, I thought they would be more powerful,
Sage Tanner said as he spat in disdain. Although the others didn't say anything, it wasn't hard to tell from their expressions that they agreed with Sage Tanner's words. After all, they were all experts, so they were more than enough to deal with these dirty traps. This seems impossible, Kevin muttered as he frowned slightly, and his ears perked up. He seemed to have heard something. What's that sound? Did you guys hear it? Kevin asked with his head tilted slightly. In a watery vortex, Kevin decisively moved forward, ordering everyone to follow him down a tunnel lined on both sides with human-shaped statues holding oil lamps in their right hands. Suddenly, a stone slab under Sage Tanner's feet caved in, causing him to freeze on the spot. It seemed to be a trap, so everyone looked around for something heavy to replace his foot so he could lift it off the stone slab. But when he was finally about to lift his leg, he realized that it had gone numb, and he couldn't move it. Suddenly, the sunken stone slab flew upward again, and several sharp arrows instantly shot out all around them as Kevin heard a sound.
I didn't hear anything, Mr. Williams. Are you sure you heard something?
Alfred Dixon swallowed slowly and said carefully. Do you think I would ask if I wasn't sure? Kevin was short-tempered as he realized the great danger he and his team were in. As he finished speaking, a rumbling sound was finally heard by the others. Everyone was stunned. A blood-red light was emitted from the statues on the walls as if they had all come alive. The statues slowly stood up straight.
What the hell?
Sage Tanner muttered in a state of utter shock. Not everyone from the Radiance had the same look of shock as Sage Tanner. When they saw the light being emitted from the statues, many of the team looked as if they were preparing to face a great enemy. They had their backs against each other and took out all kinds of weapons. At that moment, what made everyone's expression change the most was the realization that the spiritual energy emitted by these statues was almost at the strength of a level 5 warrior. How could there be so much spiritual energy here? Kevin muttered. Even he couldn't help but gulp with a sense of awe. Everyone, come over here immediately, Kevin ordered loudly. Everyone gathered here could be said to be nearly half of the combined high-end combat strength of the Radiance. If they were to be killed here today, it would be an incredible loss for the Radiance. But if everyone gathered behind Kevin, he could at least do his best to take care of them. More and more statues lit up. The tunnel seemed to be trembling. A large amount of dust fell all around them. Given the danger presented to so many experts from the Radiance there with him, this was the first time that Kevin had truly felt vulnerable since he had broken through to level 7.
Who dares to disturb me?
A low voice echoed. The deep voice kept repeating from each of the statues as if every statue had the same voice. Hearing this, the faces of all the people behind Kevin changed dramatically. I am Kevin Williams of the Radiance. I accidentally barged in. I hope you will not take offense." Kevin had taken a deep breath to calm his mind as he replied.
"How dare you lie to me?"
The voice echoed once again, seemingly coming from every one of the statues again.
"You've clearly come here coveting my treasure. I now sentence you to death."
When these words were spoken, Elijah Tanner and the others were so shocked that their eyeballs felt as though they were about to pop out of their sockets. After receiving the order, the blood-red light emitted from the statues' bodies intensified. "Blue storm technique," Kevin suddenly shouted. A burst of colors flew out from Kevin's body, sweeping in all directions. The statues that were engulfed by the light stopped emitting their own spiritual energy instantly. Some of them even crumbled to the ground right away. Because they were so heavy, they broke into pieces when they fell to the ground. Soon, the light from Kevin's blue storm technique covered more than half of the tunnel. Kevin slowly retracted his hands and let out a long breath of air.
"Damn, it's a good thing you're here, Mr. Williams,"
Sage Tanner muttered as he wiped the sweat off his forehead with his hand.
"Otherwise, we would have been dead by now."
Although the others were still in shock, their faces showed that they agreed with Sage Tanner's words. "Don't get ahead of yourself just yet. My technique's duration is limited. Such a large burst of spiritual energy can only be maintained for about half an hour. Everyone, we need to find a way out of here immediately," Kevin said while panting slightly. The blue storm technique was too powerful for description. It also had a huge impact on the person who released it. Kevin had used up almost half of his spiritual energy in a brief moment. Luckily, he had prepared a lot of pills for this very reason, so he immediately took out 2 of them and popped them in his mouth. Suddenly, someone shouted loudly, "Mr. Williams, come and take a look at this!" The voice attracted everyone's attention and they all moved closer. Between them, on the right side of a statue, a dark red stone slab was completely different from all of the other stone slabs. Just by looking at it, one could tell that this slab was very loose. "Break this statue open," Kevin frowned and ordered.
"I'll do it,"
Sage Tanner volunteered and kicked the statue to the ground, shattering it into pieces. What was surprising was that when it shattered, a mummified corpse appeared in front of everyone. The body was very tall and strong. The most amazing thing was that he looked as if he was still alive. Elijah Tanner vigilantly examined him. Then he looked at Kevin and shook his head.
"It looks like he's been dead for a long time." "Are you blind? This person looks like he just died today,"
Sage Tanner retorted in disbelief.
"Don't you dare talk to me that way!"
Elijah calmly turned to Sage and reprimanded him. Sage immediately backed down and didn't dare to anger Elijah again with his rushed words. "Look at his hand!" Tyson Tanner suddenly pointed at the corpse's right hand and said. Only then did the group notice that the oil lamp in the statue's hand was actually connected to the corpse.
"Could this be?"
Sage Tanner began to wonder. "You guys go and crack open a few of the surrounding statues. See if there are corpses inside every one of them," Kevin ordered with a serious expression.
"Yes, sir."
Several of them replied as they immediately went to check the other statues.
"Mr. Williams, I think I have read about this in that book."
Elijah Tanner stared at the corpse in front of him and said seriously. Within a few seconds, one of the men called out,
"Mr. Williams, there's a corpse inside every statue."
Everyone's heart was filled with shock.
Mr. Williams, I think it's better for us to not provoke the Water Guardian. Let's find a way out of here,"
Sage Tanner said timidly. It wasn't because he was necessarily afraid of death, but rather that Sage Tanner didn't want to die in such a cowardly manner. The lowest power base emanating from any of these statues was at the 5th stage of level 5. Whatever force was behind this could easily crush him. "We can't leave just yet. There's something here that I'm determined to get my hands on," Kevin took a deep breath and said. As time passed, the power of Kevin's blue storm technique began to weaken, and the range it could cover became smaller and smaller. Suddenly, a loud bang was heard echoing all around them. A large amount of dust was lifted up from the ground. The majestic statues seemed to have turned into paper in an instant and were immediately shattered by the violent force. "Be careful," Kevin said as he took 2 steps forward. Spiritual energy burst out from his body and formed a barrier in front of him. A man holding a sword slowly walked out from the cloud of dust. When they saw the face of the man, everyone, including Kevin, froze on the spot. The man who had appeared looked exactly the same as Kevin, as if they were looking in a mirror. "Who are you?" Alfred Dixon immediately stood up and asked sternly. "How dare you speak to me in such a tone? Do you want to die?" The man said in a cold voice that sounded exactly like Kevin's voice. His hand was holding what looked like the night dagger. Kevin frowned. He grabbed Tyson Tanner with a serious expression. "Yes, sir." Several of them replied as they immediately went to check the other statues. "Mr. Williams, I think I have read about this in that book." Elijah Tanner stared at the corpse in front of him and said seriously. Within a few seconds, one of the men called out, "Mr. Williams, there's a corpse inside every statue." Everyone's heart was filled with shock. Mr. Williams, I think it's better for us to not provoke the Water Guardian. Let's find a way out of here," Sage Tanner said timidly. It wasn't because he was necessarily afraid of death, but rather that Sage Tanner didn't want to die in such a cowardly manner. The lowest power base emanating from any of these statues was at the 5th stage of level 5. Whatever force was behind this could easily crush him. "We can't leave just yet. There's something here that I'm determined to get my hands on," Kevin took a deep breath and said. As time passed, the power of Kevin's blue storm technique began to weaken, and the range it could cover became smaller and smaller. Suddenly, a loud bang was heard echoing all around them. A large amount of dust was lifted up from the ground. The majestic statues seemed to have turned into paper in an instant and were immediately shattered by the violent force. "Be careful," Kevin said as he took 2 steps forward. Spiritual energy burst out from his body and formed a barrier in front of him. A man holding a sword slowly walked out from the cloud of dust. When they saw the face of the man, everyone, including Kevin, froze on the spot. The man who had appeared looked exactly the same as Kevin, as if they were looking in a mirror. "Who are you?" Alfred Dixon immediately stood up and asked sternly. "How dare you speak to me in such a tone? Do you want to die?" The man said in a cold voice that sounded exactly like Kevin's voice. His hand was holding what looked like the night dagger. Kevin frowned. He grabbed Tyson Tanner's shoulder and pulled him behind his back. At the same time, he reached behind his back and pulled out the night dagger. As he lifted it in front of him, the spiritual energy from each of the night daggers collided in the air. "I'm so disappointed," the other Kevin said as he looked at them with a smile on his face. After Kevin took pills to recover from using the Blue Storm technique, he and the men examined the broken statues more closely, and they realized that there were mummified corpses inside all of them. Not knowing what to make of this, a loud bang echoed all around them, and a cloud of dust rose up, and from the dust stepped a man who looked exactly like Kevin. Much to the confusion of everyone, the man lifted what looked like the night dagger as Kevin pulled out his own night dagger. As the spiritual energy from the 2 night daggers continued to collide in the air, the powerful force caused Kevin to take a few steps back. His face was filled with shock. Looking at the person in front of him who looked and moved exactly as he did, Kevin felt a strong sense of danger. Kevin had never felt the kind of spiritual energy that was coming from the other night dagger in front of him. The faces of Elijah Tanner and the others were filled with shock. Although they didn't know Kevin's exact power base, they had never seen him take a step backward like he just had. It seemed as though Kevin and this mysterious clone of Kevin were at a stalemate. Who exactly are you?" Kevin said slowly as he raised the night dagger in his hand and asked cautiously. "Isn't it obvious? I am you," the clone said as he raised the night dagger in his own hand. "Now it is time for you to die." After he finished speaking, a strong burst of spiritual energy erupted from his body. Even the air around him in the tunnel made an intense wailing sound. It felt as if the tunnel was shaking under the influence of his intense aura. Some of the weaker Radiance members couldn't help but visibly tremble, as if they couldn't withstand this much powerful spiritual energy and they were about to fall to the ground. Kevin took a deep breath and circulated the spiritual energy in his own body once again. Kevin knew that this person in front of him wasn't him, but he couldn't shake the uneasiness he felt in seeing such an identical mirror image of himself looking back at him. In addition, not only was this person's spiritual energy very strong, but his words and actions were also filled with frightening evil. Suddenly, the clone moved. The night dagger in his hand flashed with a cold light. A sudden burst of spiritual energy shot outward, filling the entire tunnel. Deep gashes continually appeared on the walls on both sides of the tunnel. A cold light flashed in Kevin's eyes. He suddenly took a step forward. The night dagger in his hand seemed to have been given a life of its own. As he moved, the violent spiritual energy emitted from his own night dagger made him feel as if he was about to lose control. Blue storm technique! Both of them shouted out at the exact same time. Two identical raindrops appeared in front of them, spinning in front of their chests. The intensity of the light that was emitted seemed to be enough to blind Elijah Tanner and the others. Then, the two of them stretched out their right hands at exactly the same time. Under their control, the spiritual energies flew out like raindrops, colliding and exploding in the air. Deafening bangs rang out through the tunnel. A large amount of dust fell down from the ceiling above them. At the same time, they both held on to their respective night daggers and attacked each other. With a sharp sound, the cold blades collided with each other. Then the two of them suddenly separated and once again stabbed each other with the daggers in their hands. For a moment, both of their silhouettes kept flashing in front of the eyes of Elijah Tanner and the others at breathtaking speed. Their speed was so fast that not even Elijah Tanner, who was at a 6th stage of level 5, could track their movements. The others could only see a series of flashes and fleeting images. The two night daggers collided in the air repeatedly, causing sparks to fly outward in all directions, and ear-splitting clangs to echo through the tunnel. Suddenly, Kevin's wrist rotated a few times. Just as the hilt of the dagger in his hand was about to break free from his control, he stuck out his index and middle fingers. A burst of spiritual energy shot out from the point where his fingers and dagger met, aiming straight at the other Kevin's heart. Seeing this, the clone's pupils suddenly contracted. He stomped on the ground with his left foot and his whole body moved quickly backward. Kevin took the opportunity to lift the night dagger above his head and slash down from above. A biting cold burst of spiritual energy was unleashed from the night dagger. But something strange happened. The energy that was released from his two fingers actually collided with the thick energy from the dagger. Kevin took a few steps back. Only after stabbing the night dagger into the ground did he stabilize his body and regain his balance. On the other hand, the other Kevin acted as if he was not affected in the least. He reached out his left hand and lightly patted the dust off his chest. What a good blue storm technique, to be used to such an extent. Tell me, what reason can you give me to let you continue living in this world? The other Kevin taunted his foe. Nothing has been decided yet. If you have the ability, kill me, and then say that again, Kevin said as he tightened his grip on the night dagger in his right hand. Then I will fulfill your wish, the other Kevin said with a smile. After saying this, his body once again flew forward. But Kevin was not afraid at all. He held on to the night dagger in his hand and moved forward to meet him again. However, Kevin felt a strong sense of danger the moment they exchanged blows. Each of his opponent's moves seemed to carry the conviction to kill him, and his imposing manner was overwhelming. With a bang, Kevin kicked his opponent's chest. Although the man was successfully pushed backward, he just gave Kevin a strange frown.
I didn't expect you to persist for as long as you have,"
the other Kevin said with an evil smile on his face, before adding, "But it doesn't matter. The end result will be the same. Besides, it would be boring to kill you too quickly." Kevin didn't answer him. Instead, he frowned and looked at him seriously. The next second, Kevin gripped the night dagger in his left hand and jumped forward again. This time, the clone reacted even faster. In the eyes of the members of the Radiance watching on, he left a line of after-images along the way behind him. The tip of the night dagger seemed to create a glaring spark in midair. What shocked Elijah Tanner and the others was that, in the face of such a fast attack, it seemed certain that Kevin would not have time to dodge. In fact, not only did he not move, he even closed his eyes. "Mr. Williams!" Several of them called out worriedly at the same time. However, Kevin acted as if he didn't hear them. He stood still as if he was an old monk in a meditative state. At that moment, Elijah Tanner and the others didn't have nearly enough time to rush forward and do anything to help him. The other Kevin's night dagger pierced straight through his chest. The faces of Elijah Tanner and the others were immediately frozen as they stood still in despair. But at that moment, Kevin suddenly opened his eyes again. He looked at the other Kevin, who was now right in front of him, and a strange smile appeared on his face. "It really is as I guessed," Kevin said in a calm tone. "When did you sense it?" the other Kevin asked, looking very calm as if he had expected this result. Elijah Tanner and the others were shocked. They were confused and did not know what had happened. Their eyes were fixed on the spot where the clone had stabbed Kevin. The strange thing was that the attack hadn't caused any substantial damage to Kevin. Not even a single drop of blood flowed out from the wound. "If it wasn't for the flaw that you revealed just now, I might still be in the dark," Kevin said calmly. "What the eyes see may not be the truth. All the power that you showed earlier was only to cover up the truth." Hearing this, the other Kevin slowly stood up. His body gradually became illusory. In less than 10 seconds, the night dagger that was stuck in Kevin's chest disappeared. A strong white light suddenly flashed, and Kevin also closed his eyes. Everyone started moving forward through the blinding light, and when they opened their eyes again, they found that they were no longer in the tunnel. Before they could figure out what had happened, they saw a few groups of people standing not far away from them. Although on the surface they seemed to be gathered together, each group's position was very particular. There was a certain amount of space between each group, as if they were squaring off against one another. At first glance, it was clear that they were a group of people who appeared to be in harmony with each other and were on guard against each other at the same time. Kevin's gaze quickly swept across the entire group of people. His expression became serious. He quickly pulled a mask from behind his back and put it over his face to conceal his identity. Among the dozens of people, more than half of them were level 5 experts. Among them, there were a few young men who had reached level 5's 8th or 9th stage. This shocked Kevin. "Mr. Williams, who are these people? Why do I feel like they are all extremely powerful?" Elijah Tanner asked softly as he took a deep breath. For the first time, he was not confident in his own strength. "I don't know either. Anyway, everyone needs to be very careful. There might be a fierce battle waiting for us," Kevin said as he finally calmed himself down with great difficulty. He slowly walked over with his men. If he had a choice, he wouldn't want to face these people, but the only way out seemed to be blocked by them. These people noticed the arrival of Kevin and the others, and they all showed different expressions of surprise and disdain at the sight of them. Kevin and the others slowly walked in front of this group of people.
"Who are you?
A man was the first to ask.
This is not a place that people like you can come to. If you want to live, get the hell out of here.
Kevin did not pay any attention to him. He saw a few familiar figures in the crowd. He recognized Calvin Morris as well as Greg Fantilli and Vincent Reeves from the Herbalist Society. It was obvious that the rest of them were experts from Washington, D.C.
Hey, I'm talking to you. Didn't you hear me?
When the man saw that Kevin didn't pay any attention to him, he immediately became angry. He was a member of the upper realm. With his strength, no matter where he went, he would be treated with respect.
Do you want to die?
Kevin finally fixed his eyes on this person and asked coldly.
What the
man started to say. But before the man could finish speaking, Elijah Tanner had already moved. He punched the man hard in the middle of his chest. A cracking sound could be heard from the man's chest.
How dare you speak to Mr. Wilkinson like that? You must have a death wish,
Elijah Tanner said with disdain. An old man suddenly took a few steps forward.
Who are you? How dare you attack one of us? He asked.
As the saying goes, a man becomes a wise man only when he grows old. If this old man could become the leader of a group like this, he must have a certain level of ability. We are from the Radiance, Kevin coldly spat out.
The Radiance? What is the Radiance?
The old man asked. He turned to the people beside him and asked in a low voice.
Is there an organization called the Radiance in the upper realm?
The person whom the man had asked was also confused. He shook his head blankly, but he felt that he wasn't necessarily correct. Vincent Reeves suddenly frowned. He took 2 steps forward and said with a smile,
It turns out that all of you from the Radiance have truly arrived. At first I was surprised that there was an organization with so many level 5 warriors in the lower realm. But then I've learned that I should never underestimate Kevin and those around him.
As Kevin fought against the clone of himself, he suddenly stopped moving and seemed to be in a meditative state. Much to the horror of Elijah Tanner and the others, he allowed the other Kevin to charge toward him and stab him in the chest with the night dagger. But Kevin merely stayed standing on the spot, and no blood flowed from the wound in his chest. The clone looked at him with a knowing expression on his face, and then he and the night dagger in Kevin's chest began to disappear. Suddenly, an overwhelmingly bright light filled the entire tunnel, and Kevin and the others soon found themselves outside of the tunnel altogether. Suddenly, several groups of people approached them. Kevin knew that they were looking at members of the upper realm, as Vincent Reeves stepped forward to greet them with a sense of skepticism. With Vincent Reeves' strength, he was naturally able to discern the power base of Elijah Tanner and all of the others. However, what surprised him most was that he was actually unable to discern the power base of Kenneth Wilkinson. He wanted to make it clear to everyone else in the upper realm that he didn't need to take Kevin and the others too seriously, and thus Vincent made light of the situation. But in his heart, he was conflicted and worried. But at the same time, he was also reminding everyone not to completely ignore these people. After all, Elijah Tanner and the others were all level 5 warriors. Vincent's words and behavior were at war with each other, just as was his inner soul. What Kevin didn't know was that before he had arrived here, these people from the upper realm had all become quite hostile toward each other, and they had all had their sights set on the same thing that he did. That was why they had all been gathered together just before Kevin and the others had emerged from the tunnel. Therefore, even if Elijah Tanner and the others really fought with the old man, no one else would likely be inclined to help one side or the other. Everyone would just stand by and watch and hope that one of their enemies would be felled by an outside force. After the old man who had confronted them discovered the origin of Kevin and the others, he felt a renewed sense of confidence. He said,
I thought you were someone worth taking note of, but it turns out that you were just a bunch of ants from the lower realm.
Oh, please. Since when can the Hoover family speak on behalf of the upper realm? Who do you think you are? Greg Fantilli coldly butted in and said with disdain. The smile on the old man's face instantly froze. He turned around and asked with anger and bitterness,
"What do you mean by that? Are you looking down on me? Or are you looking down on my entire family?"
I'm sorry, but I really don't like your family. What are you going to do about it? Greg Fantilli crossed his arms in front of his chest and said disdainfully. It wasn't just that Fantilli had youth on his side, he genuinely felt superior to this man whom Fantilli had always thought was more of a pretender than an actual power to be reckoned with. Although the old man wanted to refute him, he didn't know what to say for a moment. To put it bluntly, there was still a considerable difference in strength between their respective families. The Fantilli family was one of the few families at the top of the pyramid in the upper realm, and Greg Fantilli was to be the future patriarch of his family. In other words, he was something akin to a crowned prince in the upper realm. How could anyone afford to contradict him? If you have nothing to say, get the hell out of my way, Greg Fantilli said as he walked up to Kevin and sized him up a few times. What's your name? Kenneth Wilkinson, Kevin said, adjusting the mask covering his face. It was impossible for Kevin to tell him his real name, and certainly not to someone like Greg Fantilli, whose path he had crossed before in his real guise as Kevin Williams. Kevin also remembered clearly that the last time he saw Greg Fantilli, he was nowhere near who he was now. But now, everything was different. And it wasn't just that Kevin was a successful businessman, the winner of the Herbalist Society's contest, a powerful force in Washington, D.C. After breaking through to level 7, Greg Fantilli was nothing in Kevin's eyes. He was just a man compared to Kevin. Your power base isn't bad. Why don't you follow my family? As long as you commit to us, you will have our full support. Greg Fantilli said with a casual air to make it seem as though he was making an inconsequential offer to Kevin, though in fact, Fantilli would have thought it a great victory to align with someone as powerful as this warrior. Before Kevin could say anything else, Jake Morris suddenly stepped forward from the back of the crowd and said,
"Hey, you really talk a big game, don't you? Why don't you come back when you actually have some authority to make real decisions for your family?"
That's rich coming from you. You should worry about your own situation first before criticizing me. Greg Fantilli darted a glance at Jake Morris and said in an indifferent tone,
You don't have to worry about me,
Jake Morris said before turning back toward Kevin and saying,
Besides, Kevin Williams is associated with the Radiants and he and I are good friends. He should stick with me.
Since Mr. Morris has invited me so warmly, I won't refuse, Kevin said, almost laughing out loud under the mask. Greg Fantilli and the others' expression became dark. Originally coming to the ancient ruins was about their strength of the group. The stronger the group, the better. Originally, everyone was on par with each other. Although there were many people from the Morris family present here, they were well aware of the discord between the two Morris brothers. Now that the mysterious Radiance had suddenly appeared, a dozen level 5 warriors had shown up out of nowhere. Without a doubt, this had broken the unspoken sense of balance. Jake Morris didn't expect things to progress so smoothly. Initially, he was only thinking of giving it a try. Are you surprised that I agreed so quickly? Kevin deliberately asked in a deep voice.
What do you mean?
Jake Morris asked. He really did not understand. It's very simple. Kevin Williams is a member of the Radiants. Since you are a good friend of his, you are now a friend of mine as well, Kevin said very openly. Jake smiled and did not reply, but he thought to himself,
It looks like Kevin's status within the Radiants is quite high.
Since the people of the Radiants had made up their minds, the others of the upper realm wouldn't press their luck. Since I'm new here, why don't you tell me the current situation, Mr. Morris? Kevin asked with a faint smile.
I believe that you know something about the Water Guardian.
Why don't you tell me about that first?
We have already lost many men trying to get closer, but every passageway is filled with traps," Jake Morris said in a concise manner.
You just got to know him and you're already telling him these things. Jake, do you know what it means to be wary of strangers?"
Calvin Morris suddenly said. Jake Morris's face turned sour when he heard this. He turned around and asked coldly,
"Are you teaching me how to do things?"
"I don't have time for that. I'm just warning you to be careful. Don't die here. That would make it very difficult for me to go back and explain,"
Calvin Morris said with his hands behind his back. "You," Jake started to say, stepping toward Calvin. "Mr. Morris, don't pay too much attention to him. It's just a dog barking," Kevin said, trying to persuade him.
"What did you say?"
This time, Calvin Morris's expression changed. The other Morris family members who were standing beside him immediately took out their weapons, as if with just a word from Calvin Morris they would rush forward and slash Kevin to pieces. Elijah Tanner and the others, along with Calvin Morris's subordinates, were naturally unwilling to be outdone. The atmosphere became very tense, as if they would attack if they didn't agree with what was said next. The rest of the people from the upper realm looked at them with gloating eyes, as if they were eager to see them fight. "I'm just saying that there's a dog barking," Kevin spread out his hands and said nonchalantly. However, he could also feel Calvin Morris's spiritual energy. His power base was around the 8th stage of level 5, 2 levels higher than the miraculous blessing of God. Kevin looked at Calvin and thought to himself, "No wonder this kid took the initiative to form an alliance with me. But he'd be a fool to think that I do not know the kinds of games he's playing." As Kevin asked Jake Morris for more information about the current situation at Lake Erie and with the Upper Realm attendees, Jake immediately began telling him what he knew. However, Calvin Morris stepped in and chided his brother for sharing information with the Radiants, an organization about which they knew very little. Kevin waved off Calvin's objection, insultingly referring to him as nothing more than a barking dog. Calvin immediately took offense, as his subordinates and Kevin's subordinates both appeared ready to fight with one another. Up until now, Kevin had only heard about the Morris family's internal strife. He hadn't gotten involved in it directly and had actually only heard about it secondhand. However, the situation clearly wasn't idyllic and was perhaps more sinister than he had been led to believe. Although Jake Morris had many supporters in his family, he could only maintain a passive stance, and even if Calvin Morris didn't have a clear advantage, at least on the surface he appeared to be on top at the moment. Kevin knew he didn't have enough information about the civil war within the Morris family to make a concrete alliance, and he realized that any association with Jake could be potentially harmful to his own power base and empire.
"Listen up, you little lower realm ant. Do you have the guts to repeat what you just said?"
Calvin Morris's face had already turned deadly serious, and the spiritual energy in his body began to fluctuate intensely. What Kevin didn't know was that Calvin Morris was actually usually relatively gentle, and even the people of his family rarely saw him become angry simply from embarrassment. However, when it came to challenges related to his brother, Jake, his gentle nature always disappeared. "This is the first I've heard of you. Not only do you act like a dog, but you also look like one. You want me to repeat myself? Are you suffering from hearing loss or something?" Kevin stood up straight and said with a coy smile, "All right, I'll do my best to help you."
"How dare you? You have a death wish!"
Calvin Morris shouted, his face turning bright red.
Welcome to Battle Royale. The match is about to start. Time for the mission. Get ready.
Wow. Kolay bir alma gibi.
First blood. Welcome to Battle Royale. The match is about to start. Time for the mission. Get ready. blood. The revived flight will arrive in 1 minute. Chip terminal is almost ready. The safe zone is collapsing. Airdrop incoming. The revived flight will arrive in 1 minute. Airdrop has been delivered. Target in sight. Our team is surrounded by unknown enemies. Need backup!
You'd hardly know to look at it now, but our best intel says it was a secret research institute. Not so secret anymore. Let's just call it an ex-research institute. Unsurprisingly, there are many places in this research institute to explore. Use caution when entering new areas, and bring me back all the delicious Some of the electronic components of this device are damaged. Keep your eyes peeled for new ones. The advanced team deployed this device to provide you with all the shit. quite like an underground lab.
These coins can be powerful, but the results are random. Why don't you see what happens?
This component seems good. Use it on the device in the central house. Who knows? Maybe it will work.
Reloading. Changing back. Reloading. Cover me. Changing back. Cover me.
This component seems good. Use it on the device in the central house. Who knows? Maybe it will work. Good, that got it. Now, put in a weapon and drop it. You'll like what happens next. return, pop some smoke. I'll have a helicopter pick you up.
Battle Royale. The match is about to start. Time for the mission. Get ready. First blood. The revived flight will arrive in 1 minute. Chip terminal is almost ready. The safe zone is collapsing. Airdrop incoming. The revived flight will arrive in 1 minute. Airdrop incoming. The revived flight will arrive in 1 minute.